She counted the seconds in her head because it was the only thing keeping her sane. 37 days in a concrete room with no windows. 37 days of not knowing whether anyone was coming. 37 days of listening to the sound of boots in the corridor and wondering if this time they were coming to kill her. And then, at 2:14 in the morning on a Tuesday in November, the wall came down. Not metaphorically. Literally. The charge blew the exterior wall of the compound clean off its foundation, and through the dust and the smoke and the ringing silence that followed, the first thing she heard was an American voice saying, quietly and without any particular drama, "We have got you. Let's go." What happened in the next 3 minutes and 11 seconds was not in any textbook. It was not covered in any official press release. The men who did it have never spoken publicly about it. And a classified file that documents the operation in precise detail remains locked inside a facility in Northern Virginia that most people with high-level clearances have never been invited into. But the outcome was this. 11 hostages, including 3 American citizens, were recovered alive from a heavily fortified compound in a hostile operating environment. 0 friendly casualties. For minutes had been allocated. 3 minutes and 11 seconds was all it took. This is the story of how that happened. This is the story of a unit that made it possible, the intelligence operation that set up, the split-second decisions that could have unraveled everything, and the single moment, one choice, made in less than a heartbeat, by a man whose name the world will never officially know, that saved every life in that building. Settle in, because this one does not let go. The 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment-Delta, known to the world as Delta Force, and known internally by a name that changes with enough regularity to make any public reference to it immediately outdated, was created in 1977 by Colonel Charlie Beckwith, a veteran of the Vietnam War who had spent time embedded with the British Special Air Service and returned to the United States, convinced that his country needed something it did not yet have. Not more soldiers. A different kind of soldier entirely. Beckwith's vision was a unit of operators. Not fighters, operators. Capable of conducting direct action missions, hostage rescue, and counterterrorism operations at the highest level of precision and speed. The selection process he designed, which draws from across all branches of the U.S. military and remains one of the most demanding in the world, was built on a simple principle. The candidates who pass are not the ones who are strongest or fastest. They are the ones who keep functioning correctly when everything around them has stopped making sense. That is a different quality entirely, and it is extraordinarily rare. By the time of the operation we are discussing here, Delta Force had been deployed to virtually every significant direct action mission in American military history across 5 decades. They had been in Mogadishu. They had been in the mountains of Afghanistan before most people knew there was a war in those mountains. They had been in places that, if listed here, would require this account to end abruptly. What is documentable is this. Their hostage rescue track record, in operations that have been partially or fully declassified, is without parallel in the world. The 4-minute window assigned to this particular mission was not a guess. It was a calculation, based on known threat response times, structural analysis of the compound, and the unit's own performance data from previous operations. For minutes was what the math said. The men on the ground decided the math was being too generous. The 11 people held inside that compound had been taken across a period of 6 weeks in 3 separate incidents in a region where the operating environment was, to use the polite phrase used in intelligence assessments, deeply complex. Among them were aid workers from 2 different organizations, a journalist who had been reporting on local conditions for an American outlet, and 3 individuals whose precise roles in the region have not been publicly confirmed. What had been confirmed? Through a combination of signals intelligence, human intelligence assets who had spent months building relationships in the area, and the extremely dangerous work of a single source who was physically inside the compound at various points during the lead-up to the operation, was that the hostages were alive, that they were being held in a specific wing of a 3-building compound, and that the individuals holding them had both the intent and the capability to move or harm them if they received any indication that a rescue was being planned. The intelligence picture had taken 11 weeks to build. 11 weeks of satellite imagery analysis, of carefully managed human assets, of signals collection that required physical proximity to the target area that carried its own enormous risk to the people doing it. The CIA's ground branch personnel who had been working the intelligence side of this operation had, in the assessment of the senior intelligence officer who oversaw the file, produced the most complete pre-operational picture that had been assembled for a hostage rescue mission in over a decade. Every guard position had been mapped. Every shift change had been timed. The location of every hostage within the compound had been confirmed within 12 hours of the assault. The one variable that could not be fully controlled was time. Intelligence of this quality has a shelf life. The longer the gap between collection and action, the greater the risk that something, a guard change, a decision by the captors to move the hostages, a routine variation in routine, would invalidate enough of the picture to make the operation untenable. The window, as the mission planning team saw it, was real but narrow. The decision to execute was made at the highest level of the U.S. government, in a room with no cameras and no recording devices, at approximately 11 o'clock on a Monday morning. Mission planning for a hostage rescue of this complexity does not happen quickly, even with an 11-week intelligence bill behind it. The operational planning phase, the translation of intelligence into a sequence of actions that real human beings can execute under pressure in an environment where the unexpected is not a possibility but a certainty, requires a kind of meticulous, obsessive attention to detail that is difficult to describe without sounding theatrical. It is not theatrical. It is the difference between people coming home and people not coming home. The Delta operators assigned a mission ran the compound layout in a purpose-built replica facility for 6 days before the operation, not 6 sessions. 6 days, nearly continuously, until every angle of entry, every guard position, every doorway, every blind corner was as familiar to them as the layout of their own homes. The sequencing of the assault, which team would enter which structure, in what order, through which point of entry, and what each team's actions would be at each stage, was rehearsed to a level of precision that measured individual movements in seconds. The 4-minute window was not arbitrary. It was derived from the rehearsal data. 4 minutes was how long the assault teams had before the estimated response time of the nearest armed elements outside the compound would bring additional threat into the equation. Every contingency that could be anticipated was planned for. What happened if a hostage was injured and could not move independently? What happened if the guard positions had changed? What happened if the structure itself had been modified? What happened if communications were jammed? For each scenario, there was a branch plan. And for each branch plan, there was a rehearsal. The men going through that compound had, by the time they boarded the aircraft that would take them to the forward staging base, run the mission in their heads so many times that the physical execution was almost secondary to the mental one. They had already done this. They just had to do it once more. For real. The assault teams were inserted by helicopter at a point 3 kilometers from the compound at 1:47 local time. 3 kilometers on foot, in darkness, in terrain that had been studied extensively but never walked by any member of the team, carrying full assault kit that averaged around 45 kilograms per operator. The movement to the compound took 22 minutes. The target was reached at 2:09. The assault was initiated at 2:14. In those 5 minutes between arrival at the outer perimeter and the initiation of the breach, the team conducted final confirmation of guard positions, confirmed communications with the command element that was monitoring the operation from an aircraft overhead, and made one last check of the timing sequence. Everything matched the intelligence picture. The operation was a go. What the operators felt in those 5 minutes is something that has been described across many years and many different accounts from special operations veterans in surprisingly consistent terms. Not fear in the way most people understand fear. Something more specific. A compression of awareness. The world narrows to the immediate task, the immediate second, the immediate decision. Everything outside the perimeter of the mission disappears. Families, futures, the abstract weight of what failure would mean. All of it falls away. What remains is the job, and the people doing it beside you. The breach charges were set in 60 seconds flat. The teams were in position. The commander's voice came through the radio, measured and clear, in the second before 2:14. The word he used, the ghost signal that initiated the assault, is not on record. But whatever it was the last quiet moment for the next 3 minutes and 11 seconds. The exterior wall of the compound's eastern wing came down at 2 hours and 14 minutes. The charges had been placed to create a breach point large enough for a 2-man stack to move through in less than 2 seconds, which they did. Simultaneously, the northern entrance of the main building was hit by a second team using mechanical breach, a frame charge designed to take the door and its frame out together cleanly, in a single action that eliminates the delay of a door that has been reinforced against exactly this kind of entry. The guard station at that entrance had approximately 1 second of awareness before the team was through and moving. In that second, he made a choice that cost him the initiative and the team nothing. The intelligence had placed the hostages in 2 groups. 7 in a room on the ground floor of the eastern wing, 4 a room on the upper floor of the main building, accessible by a single staircase that the planning had identified as the highest risk point of the entire assault route. A guard at the top of that staircase, with any kind of early warning, could create a situation that the 4-minute window could not accommodate. The operators knew this. The solution had been rehearsed with a precision that bordered on the clinical. The team assigned to the staircase moved at a pace that the intelligence officer reviewing the mission footage later described, without hyperbole, as the fastest he had ever seen inside a structure. The ground floor room was reached at 2 hours, 14 minutes, and 58 seconds. 58 seconds from breach. The 7 hostages were exactly where the intelligence said they would be. The team leader's first words to them were precise and functional. Delta Force, we are extracting now. Stay low, stay together, move when I move. There was no time for anything else. There was no time for relief or tears or the human processing of what was happening. There was only the next 15 seconds, and then the 15 seconds after that, and the route to the breach point and the waiting aircraft. They moved. The upper floor team reached the staircase at 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 12 seconds. The guard was there. The moment lasted less than 2 seconds and is documented in the classified record. The 4 hostages on the upper floor were reached at 2 hours, 15 minutes, and 31 seconds. All 4 were mobile. All 4 moved on instruction. The team was back through the breach point with all 11 hostages at 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 11 seconds. 3 minutes and 11 seconds from the initiation of the breach. The helicopter extraction was completed at 2:31. By 2:32, the compound was behind them, and every person who had gone had come out. The 11 hostages were flown to a medical facility at a forward operating base for initial assessment. 3 required immediate medical attention for conditions developed during their captivity. All 11 survived. The 3 American citizens among them were repatriated within 72 hours. The full medical and psychological support process that followed their return is, by the accounts of those who have spoken about it, long and difficult in ways that the 3 minutes and 11 seconds of the rescue cannot fully capture. Coming home is not the end of what captivity does to a person, but it is the beginning of the possibility of recovery. And without the operation, there would have been no beginning at all. The operators who conducted the mission returned to their unit, wrote their after-action reports, attended their debriefs, identified the things that had gone according to plan, and the things that had deviated from it, and what those deviations meant for future planning, and then prepare for the next mission. That is not a dramatic statement. That is the operational reality of the unit and the people in it. The mission was not the end of something. It was one data point in a continuous cycle of planning, preparation, execution, and learning that does not stop and does not rest and does not celebrate itself in any way that the public gets to see. What this operation demonstrates, what it adds to the body of evidence that has been accumulating across 50 years of Delta Force operations, is not simply that the unit is exceptionally skilled, though it is. It is that the combination of intelligence quality, mission planning discipline, training intensity, and the specific human qualities that Delta Selection identifies and develops produces outcomes that should not be possible by any conventional measure of what is achievable in a hostile environment under time pressure. For minutes was the window. 3 minutes and 11 seconds was the answer. The 49 seconds they left on the clock were not an accident. They were the result of every decision, every rehearsal, every lesson learned from every previous operation that had come before this one. 11 people went home. That is the number that matters. Everything else, the classified file, the unnamed operators, the compound that no longer exists in the form it did on that Tuesday morning in November, everything else is context of that number. 11. And the people who made that number possible are, right now, preparing to make it possible again for someone else. Somewhere, in a room with no windows, someone is counting the seconds. And somewhere, people who will never be named are making sure the count does not go on much longer. If the story reached you, if at any point in the last 10 minutes you felt the weight of what 11 people went through and what it took to bring them back, then you already understand why this channel exists. We are here for the stories that do not make the front page. The operations that happen in the dark, carried out by people whose names stay classified, whose faces stay out of photographs, who come home quietly and then do it again. These stories deserve to be told properly. And this community is where that happens. Drop a comment below. Tell us what moment hit you hardest. Tell us whether you think the 4-minute window was the operators being conservative or the planners being optimistic. Tell us what you want to see next, because this channel runs on what this community asks for. Every comment, every subscription, every share puts the next story in front of someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe if you are not already here. The next operation is already in production. You do not want to miss it.